My name is Margo Linden, and last October my older sister added me to a group chat by mistake. The chat was called Margo Updates. It had been running for 4 years. There were 1,847 messages in it, and every single one was about me. I didn't scream. I didn't reply. I made a pot of coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and started reading. Then I started screenshotting. 3 weeks later, I walked into my grandmother's 82nd birthday lunch with a 312-page binder under my arm, and I set it down quietly next to her plate before anyone else arrived. I'm Margo Linden. I'm 34 years old. I work as a school counselor at a public middle school in Greenfield, Indiana. And what I'm about to tell you is the story of how my sisters spent 4 years building a record of who they really were, and how my grandmother spent 2 years quietly preparing for the day someone finally proved it. Before I tell you what happened at that lunch, what my Aunt Marilyn said when she opened the binder, and the look on Rhiannon's face when Grandma started turning pages, I need to ask you for a small favor. If you've ever been the person at the family table that everyone talks around but never to, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to the summer I was 12, and a sentence my grandmother said to me on her front porch that I didn't understand for another 22 years. Greenfield, Indiana, in the summer of 2003. My grandmother Edith lived in a small white clapboard house on the corner of Apple Street and 6th, with a porch swing that creaked on the third hinge from the left. She had a garden full of tomatoes she didn't really eat, 2 hummingbird feeders she refilled every Sunday morning, and a tin bread box on the kitchen counter that always had Nilla wafers in it. She drank her coffee black. She kept her hair short. She'd worked as a county clerk in Hancock County for 37 years, and people in town still called her Mrs. Linden when they saw her at the IGA. I was the youngest of 3 girls. Rhiannon was 19 that summer, home from her first year at Ball State, all confidence and lip gloss and a Nokia phone that flipped open. Colette was 16, in that mean stretch of high school where she rated everyone's outfits at the dinner table and laughed when nobody else did. I was the one with the chipped front tooth and the library card and the habit of sitting too close to grown-ups when they were talking, because I wanted to hear what real conversations sounded like. That summer, my mom dropped us off at Grandma's most weekday afternoons. She was working a second job at the Anthem call center in Indianapolis, and Daddy was on the road for the John Deere dealership most weeks. Grandma made us peanut butter and saltine crackers for lunch and let us watch The Price is Right on her tube TV. Rhiannon and Colette would disappear up to the spare bedroom most days, doing whatever older sisters do behind a closed door. I'd stay downstairs with Grandma. I'd help her snap green beans into a melamine bowl on the porch, and we'd talk about books and birds and the people on her street. One August afternoon, she was watering her petunias from a green plastic watering can, and I was sitting on the top porch step with a popsicle. The cicadas were so loud I had to lean forward to hear her. Out of nowhere, she said, "Margo, you watch people, don't you? You see them." I shrugged. I was 12. I didn't know what to say. She set the watering can down on the porch railing and looked at me for what felt like a long time. Then she said something I never forgot, even though it took me until I was 34 to understand it. She said, "Honey, the loud ones tell you what they want you to see. The quiet ones tell you what's actually there. People underestimate the quiet ones their whole life." That's a useful thing to know. I nodded like I understood. I didn't. I just liked that she was talking to me like I was a grown-up. She went back to her petunias. Rhiannon yelled something down the stairs about the bathroom, and Colette laughed, and the screen door slapped shut behind one of them. Grandma didn't look up. She just smiled a little, the kind of smile you give to a private thought, and kept watering her flowers. I didn't think about that sentence again for 2 decades. Not when Rhiannon graduated and got into real estate. Not when Colette married a dentist and started managing his office. Not when I went to Indiana University, got my master's in school counseling, married a man named Trent in 2014, and came home to Greenfield to start a life that was small and steady and mine. Not when Trent and I got divorced 4 years ago in the fall of 2021. We were 30. There was no scandal. He didn't cheat. I didn't cheat. We just sat at our kitchen table one Sunday morning over cold coffee and admitted we'd been roommates for a year and a half. I cried. He cried. We split everything in mediation, sold the house in Cumberland, and I bought a small 2-bedroom bungalow on Park Avenue in Greenfield with a fenced yard for my dog and a sun porch I painted yellow myself. I started over. I joined a book club. I went back to therapy. I learned to make beef stew the way my grandmother made it, with carrots cut on the bias and a glass of red wine in the broth. I thought I was doing okay. I thought my family thought I was doing okay too. That's the part that's hard to say out loud. The first family dinner after the divorce was at my parents' house in November of 2021. My mom made her green bean casserole. My dad carved the turkey. Rhiannon was there with her husband Greg and their 2 boys, who were 9 and 7 at the time. Colette was there with her husband Marcus, the dentist. Grandma Edith sat at the end of the table in the chair she'd always sat in, with her cardigan buttoned up to the second button and her hands folded in her lap when she wasn't eating. Rhiannon waited until we'd all sat down. Then she looked at me across the table with her warm real estate lady smile and said, "Marg, honey, we just want to say, whatever you need from us, we are here, okay? Don't isolate." I said thank you. Colette said, "Seriously, Margo, we've all been worried sick about you. I told Marcus, I said, we have got to make sure she doesn't, spiral." I said I wasn't spiraling. I said the divorce was mutual. I said I was actually doing pretty well. Rhiannon reached across the table and patted my hand. "Of course you are. Of course you are. We just want you to know we see how hard this is for you." Grandma Edith at the end of the table was buttering a roll. She didn't look up. She didn't say anything. She just buttered her roll, set the knife down on the edge of her plate, and took a small bite. I remember thinking, that's strange. Grandma usually has something to say at dinner, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I drove home that night in my Honda CR-V with the heat blasting because the thermostat was acting up, and I thought, maybe my sisters and I are going to be closer now. Maybe a hard year for me will bring us together. Looking back, that was the first night the chat got busy. Not that I knew. Not for another 2 years and 11 months. The micro-cruelties started so small I didn't have a name for them. They were the kind of things you can't even bring up to a friend without sounding paranoid. Just little stings. The kind that bruise on the inside but never leave a mark anyone else can see. That December, Rhiannon hosted Christmas Eve at her house in McCordsville. She had a big new build with a 2-story foyer and a Christmas tree that hit the ceiling. She had a printed seating chart for dinner. 22 people. I was at the kids' table. Now look, I love kids. I work with kids. I'm great at the kids' table. But I was 30 years old, recently divorced, and the only adult at a folding table in the laundry room with 7 children under 12 eating off paper plates. Colette's husband Marcus walked past at one point with a glass of wine, looked at me, and said, "Hey, Aunt Margo, you good in here?" I said I was good. He said, "Cool, you're killing it," and kept walking. I sat there and cut my niece's ham into smaller pieces and told myself it was fine. The seating was probably random. Rhiannon had a lot to manage. Don't make it about you. After dinner, I went to use the bathroom in the hallway off the kitchen. The kitchen was empty except for Rhiannon and Colette, refilling wine glasses by the island. I stopped just inside the hallway because I heard my name. Rhiannon was saying, "Did you see her face when she walked in? She looks rough, Coco, like rough. Colette laughed. "Did you ever think she'd be the one to get divorced first? I mean, out of the 3 of us." Rhiannon said, "I genuinely thought she'd just stay married out of inertia forever. Trent could not have been an exciting marriage. Like, be honest." Colette said, "He was not. He was a beige man, but still. Margo's not exactly a catch herself, She's like a school counselor and she has that dog." Rhiannon laughed, kind of through her nose, the way she used to laugh at me when we were teenagers, and I came downstairs in an outfit she thought was wrong. She said, "Mom said she's going to need help with money. Probably." Colette said, "Of course she is, of course she is." I stood in the hallway for another second. Then I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and ran the faucet. I sat on the closed toilet lid. I didn't cry. I just sat there with the water running and waited until my face went still again. Then I came out, said my goodbyes, hugged everyone, drove home, and let my dog Otis up onto the couch with me in his Christmas sweater. I told myself sisters say things. Sisters always say things. They didn't mean it. The next thing happened in February. My birthday is February 8th. That year I turned 31. Both my sisters texted me happy birthday. Mom and Dad called. Grandma sent a card with a $50 bill in it and a note in her county clerk handwriting that said, "Margo, buy something useless. Love, Grandma E." But there was no plan, no dinner, nothing. The previous year, when Colette turned 35, Rhiannon had organized a whole spa weekend in French Lick. The year Rhiannon turned 38, Colette had hosted a wine and paint night at her house with 11 of Rhiannon's friends. For my 31st, a text, a card, a dollar amount, the polite minimum. I made myself a steak for dinner that night. I opened a bottle of wine. I watched Practical Magic on the couch with Otis. I told myself it was fine. Maybe people were busy. Maybe they'd thought I wouldn't want anything because of the divorce. Maybe I'd needed to ask for what I wanted, and I just hadn't asked. The next month was Rhiannon's son Eli's 10th birthday. She rented out the trampoline park in Indianapolis. I drove an hour each way to be there. I helped her serve cupcakes. When the photos went up on Facebook the next morning, I'd been cropped out of the family picture. Just her two boys, Greg, Colette, and Marcus, and their daughter, my parents, Grandma Edith. And then a crop line right where my left shoulder had been. I wrote Rhiannon a private message. I said, "Hey, just so you know, I noticed I got cropped out of the family photo from yesterday. Was that intentional?" She replied within 4 minutes. "OMG, Margo, I'm so sorry. The original photo had a weird angle on you and your eyes were closed. I cropped it for the post and didn't even think about it. I'll repost the original tonight, promise. Love you." 2 hearts. She did not repost the original. The cropped one stayed up. I checked. For 11 months. I checked because that little stab kept going through me every time it came up in my Facebook memories the next year and the year after. By that summer, the summer of 2022, I had started keeping a little mental file. I didn't write anything down, but I noticed. Colette's daughter Brynel's first communion that May, and I was the only adult who didn't get a corsage. The Sunday brunch at my parents' for Mother's Day, where Rhiannon stood up and toasted both my mom and my grandmother for being the strongest, most supportive women in our lives, and didn't mention me, the only other woman at the table with no kids of her own to be a mother to. The text from Colette in July that said, "Hey, are you bringing anyone to Lake Monroe weekend?" And when I said no, "Oh, good, actually, because we don't have a lot of room." Each one of those things by itself you could explain. You could write off. That's what I did. I wrote them off. I thought about my therapist's voice saying, "Margo, you tend to make yourself responsible for other people's behavior. You don't have to do that." So I tried to stop doing that. I tried to take what they offered. I tried to assume good faith. But here's the thing about good faith. You can extend it for a long, long time without realizing that the other person stopped extending it back to you years ago. You can be the only person at the table still pretending it's a fair conversation. And the meaner the other person is being in private, the more they need you to keep believing it's all in your head. That's what was happening to me. I just didn't have the receipts yet. The thing that finally cracked open the wall happened on a Tuesday in October of 2024. October 14th, to be exact. I remember the date because I have it written on the inside front cover of the binder, in my own handwriting, in blue ink. What I've been reading since October 14th. My phone buzzed at 9:47 on a Tuesday night. I almost didn't pick it up. I was on the couch with Otis, watching a Hallmark movie I'd seen before, eating leftover spaghetti out of a glass mixing bowl from my grandmother's kitchen, the white Pyrex one with the daisies, that she'd given me when I moved into my house on Park Avenue. The one she said had been a wedding shower gift from 1968 and had outlived 3 of her toasters. The buzz was a text from Rhiannon. Just a screenshot. No caption, I opened it. It was a screenshot of a different conversation. A text thread between Rhiannon and somebody named Coco Cherry Blossom, which I knew was Colette because Rhiannon had called Colette Coco since we were kids. The screenshot showed 3 messages. Coco, did you see what she wore to Mom's birthday lunch on Saturday? Coco, like the floral cardigan from Kohl's is back, baby. Coco, I swear to God Margo dresses like she's auditioning to be a substitute teacher in 2009. I sat very still on the couch. Otis lifted his head and looked at me. I looked at the screen. The screenshot had been sent to me, by Rhiannon, by accident. I stared at it for a full minute. I waited to feel something. I felt my face get warm and then cold, and then my hands started shaking just a little bit, the way they shake when you've had too much coffee and not enough food. I set the bowl of spaghetti on the coffee table. 3 more dots appeared at the bottom of the screen. Rhiannon was typing. Then the dots disappeared. Then they came back. Then they disappeared again. Finally, a message came through. Rhiannon, OMG Margo, so sorry that wasn't meant for you. A friend was asking me about a cardigan I have and I sent the wrong screenshot. Ignore that. I read that message 6 or 7 times. A friend asking about a cardigan. The contact was named Coco. The screenshot was a conversation where someone named Coco was making fun of what I had worn to my mother's birthday lunch 4 days earlier, a floral cardigan from Kohl's that, yes, I had bought in 2019 and that, yes, I had worn proudly because I liked it. I didn't reply right away. I sat there. I listened to the ice maker drop ice in the kitchen. I listened to my own breathing. I scratched Otis's ear. I tried to think. 3 things were possible. 1, Rhiannon really had sent the screenshot to the wrong person, and Coco really was Colette, and the 2 of them were just having a private bitchy moment, the way sisters sometimes do. Mean, but isolated. 2, Rhiannon had sent it to me on purpose as a passive-aggressive thing because she wanted me to know what they thought. 3, there was more. I texted back slowly. No worries, lol, honest mistake. 3 smiling, crying emojis came back from her instantly. I put the phone down on the arm of the couch. I sat in the dark of my living room with the TV still playing and Otis on my lap, and I thought. And then I thought about something that had happened the previous week that I'd written off. Colette had texted me a meme about being the youngest sibling. Cute, harmless. But she'd typed, thinking of you, and a second later she'd unsent it and replaced it with, thought you'd find this funny. At the time I'd assumed she'd had a typo. Now I wondered if she'd typed something to a different chat, sent it to the wrong window, and unsent it because she realized. I thought about the time in August when Rhiannon had laughed at her phone at the restaurant and then locked the screen face down before I could see it. I thought about the thing my grandmother had said on the porch in 2003 that I'd never understood. The loud ones tell you what they want you to see. The quiet ones tell you what's actually there. People underestimate the quiet ones their whole life. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to Otis snore. Around 3:30 in the morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront anyone. I wasn't going to ask. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to wait and watch and see what came next. I was going to be the quiet one Grandma had been talking about. 6 days later, on the night of October 20th, my phone buzzed at 7:14 in the evening. Otis and I were in the kitchen. I was making chili. I picked up the phone with a wooden spoon still in my hand. It was a notification. New group message. 3 participants. The group was called Margo Updates. The other 2 members were Rhiannon Linden Kessler and Colette Linden Voss. The first message was from Rhiannon. It said, "Wait, did I add Margo to this thread by accident? I was trying to add the airbnb confirmation." The second message was from Colette. It said, "What? RHI, no." The third message was from Rhiannon. It said, "OMG, hold on, removing now." There was a fourth notification half a second later, telling me I had been removed from the group, Margo Updates. I set the phone down on the counter, very carefully, the way you set down a glass of water that's full to the rim. I turned off the burner under the chili. I sat down on a kitchen chair. The group was called Margo Updates. There were 1,847 messages in it. I had seen the message count for 1/4 of a second when I'd opened the notification before they'd kicked me out. 1,847 messages about me. I called my friend Lacey, who is a paralegal at a firm in Indianapolis. I had met her in book club. She picked up on the third ring. I said, "Lacey, I need a quiet favor. I think I have a situation I need to document. How fast can you and your firm pull SMS records and screenshots with a chain of custody before someone deletes a thread?" She said, "What kind of thread?" I said, "A 4-year group chat between my 2 sisters, about me." There was a pause. Lacey is a very calm person. She has been a paralegal for 16 years and she has seen every kind of family come into her firm's lobby crying, and she has stopped being shocked. She said, "Margo, listen to me. Don't delete anything. Don't reply to either of them. Don't acknowledge it. Tomorrow morning, I want you to come into my office and we're going to do this the right way. There's a process. We've done it for divorce cases 100 times. 2 of my partners have admin credentials with both major carriers' subpoena response teams. We can preserve a thread before they nuke it." She paused. Then she said, "Margo, I'm so sorry. You okay?" I said, I'm going to be. I went back to the chili. I let it simmer. I fed Otis. I ate a bowl standing at the counter. I did the dishes. I put on my pajamas. I sat at my kitchen table with the white Pyrex bowl from my grandmother in front of me, empty now, and I looked at it for a long time. The painted daisies were faded but still cheerful. 1968. My grandmother had been a 25-year-old county clerk with 2 daughters when somebody had given her this bowl. She had used it. She had washed it. She had given it to me. I thought about the porch. I thought about her sentence. I thought about what she had been telling me when I was 12 that I had not understood. I went into my bedroom, opened my closet, and pulled down the shoebox where I keep paper things. I took out a fresh blue Bic pen. I took out a yellow legal pad. I sat back down at the kitchen table, and at the top of the page I wrote one line. October 14th, Tuesday night. Screenshot from R, and then I started, very calmly, to make a list of every small thing I could remember from the last 4 years. Every cropped photo. Every kid's table seating. Every fake concern phone call. Every weekend I hadn't been invited to. Every Sunday Rhiannon had said, "Marg, are you eating?" with that head tilt. Every time Colette had told a story about me at a family party that wasn't quite right, but wasn't worth correcting. By the time I went to bed at 1:14 in the morning, I had 3 pages. It turned out to be a small fraction of what was in that group chat. I want to stop for 1 second and ask you something. Have you ever found out, completely by accident, that people who claim to love you were saying things about you in private that you would never have said about your worst enemy? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know how you handled it. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe because this story is about to turn, and I want you here when it does. The next morning was a Wednesday. I called into the middle school and told them I had a doctor's appointment. I drove to Indianapolis with Otis in the passenger seat in his harness because I didn't want to be alone, and I parked in the visitor garage at Lacey's firm at 9:55 in the morning. The firm is in a beige office building off North Meridian. The lobby smells like coffee and floor wax. Lacey met me in the conference room with a thermos of coffee, a yellow folder, and her colleague Devin, who is the firm's e-discovery specialist. Devin had a laptop, 2 external hard drives, and the patient look of a person who has watched a lot of marriages end on Tuesdays. He asked me a series of careful questions. Did I have any direct evidence of the existence of the group chat? Did I have the screenshot from the previous week? Did I have proof I'd been added to the group, even briefly? Did I know what carrier my sisters used? Did I have records of historical messages from either of them on my own phone? I had everything. I had the screenshot from October 14th. I had my own 7-year text history with Rhiannon. I had a screenshot of the group notification from October 20th before they removed me with the participant list visible. I had Colette's unsent meme from earlier in October, which had pinged my watch before she pulled it back, and the watch had cached the preview. Devin nodded the entire time I talked. He took notes on a yellow pad with a clicky pen. When I was done, he said, Margo, you did the single most important thing you could have done. You didn't reply and you didn't accuse. That means they don't know you're documenting, which means they have not deleted anything yet, which means we have a window." He explained, in plain English, what was about to happen. The firm had handled spousal cases where one partner needed to preserve communications they didn't directly have access to. There was a legal process called a litigation hold. The firm could send a notice to my sister's carriers on behalf of an active matter, requiring them to preserve all SMS and MMS records associated with my sister's numbers, including the contents of group threads. Because I had documented evidence of being added to the thread, and because the thread was named after me and discussed me, the firm could pursue it as part of a potential defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress matter. He said the words, intentional infliction of emotional distress, the way you'd say drywall, like it was just a thing that exists in the world. I said, "Devin, I don't actually want to sue them. I don't want to take them to court. I don't want anyone to lose money. I want to know what they said, and I want it on paper, so nobody can ever tell me I imagined it." Devin and Lacey looked at each other for a second. Lacey said, "Margo, that's even better. We can do this without filing anything. Litigation holds get sent every day in cases that never go to court. Most of them never do. We use them as a stop-the-bleeding tool. We send the notice, the carrier preserves the records, we issue a subpoena under your attorney's authorization, and you get the records. Privately. You don't have to do anything with them after that. They become yours." I said, "How long?" Devin said, "If we send the hold today, we should have a complete preservation acknowledgement within 48 hours. Subpoena response, with full thread contents and metadata, 10 to 14 business days." I did the math in my head. Today was October 23rd. 2 weeks would put me at November 6th. My grandmother's 82nd birthday was December 7th. Her birthday lunch had been booked for Saturday, December 7th at noon, at the Mill House restaurant on State Road 9, the same restaurant we'd done her 80th and her 81st. I had time. I had plenty of time. I said, "Do it." I signed 3 documents. I paid a retainer of $1,100 on my Discover card. Lacey hugged me in the parking garage and said, "Margo, I have known you for 6 years. You are one of the kindest people I've ever met. I hope you understand that what you're about to read is not going to be about you. It's going to be about them." I drove home. I picked up a chicken pot pie from the freezer aisle at the Marsh supermarket on the way back into Greenfield because I couldn't think about cooking. I ate it on my couch with Otis. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Grandma. I didn't tell anyone. For 10 days I went to work, came home, walked Otis, and pretended nothing had happened. Rhiannon texted me twice in that window, once to ask if I was bringing a side dish to Thanksgiving. Once to say, "Hey, just checking in on you, miss your face." I replied normally, "Pumpkin bars, miss yours too." On November 5th, late in the afternoon, the records came in. Lacey called me. She said, "Margo, they're on a secure portal. You can review them at the firm or I can mail you a printed copy. Your choice, there's a lot." I said, "How much?" She said, 1,847 messages. Across 4 years and 1 month, 2 senders. The thread was created October 11th, 2020. The last message was the night of October 20th when they kicked you out. We've got everything. I drove to Indianapolis the next day. I sat in a small, windowless room at Lacey's firm with a fresh cup of coffee and a printed packet that was 312 pages long. Devin had organized it chronologically, with timestamps and sender names in the left margin, the way court exhibits are organized. The cover page said, "M. Linden, Preservation Set 1, Confidential." I opened it. I started reading. I read for 4 hours. I'm not going to read all of it to you. Most of it is the small stuff, the cardigan jokes, the "she's so weird" jokes, the "did you see Margo's hair, when is she going to fix that?" The play-by-plays of every family event, sent in real time from under the tablecloth. "She's bringing up the divorce again. Mom is doing the worried voice with her in the kitchen. Send help. Mark just called her Aunt Margo. She lit up like a Christmas tree. It's so sad. But there were 3 things in that packet that I want to tell you about, because 3 things in that packet were not jokes. The first was a thread in March of 2022. It was about my dog Otis. I had adopted Otis right after my divorce. He's a rescue, a beagle mix, and at the time he had separation anxiety bad enough that I was paying for a dog walker to come at lunchtime. My sisters knew this because I had mentioned it once at a family dinner. In March of 2022, Rhiannon had written to Colette, "Honestly, the kindest thing she could do for that dog is rehome him. She literally cannot give him what he needs. She's barely keeping herself together." Colette had replied, "I almost said something at Easter. Mark said don't. But he's a sweet dog. He deserves better." Rhiannon, "We should look into shelters that take owner surrenders quietly." Colette, "Wait, are you serious?" Rhiannon, "Maybe. If she ever asks for help, we just gently steer her toward giving him up." Colette, "Lol, yeah, she would not give him up. He's like her whole personality now." Rhiannon, "Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it, Skull?" I had to stand up and walk to the window. I looked out at the parking lot for a minute. I thought about Otis at home on the couch, in his blue collar with his little gray muzzle. I thought about the dog walker, Maria, who I still pay $35 a visit because Otis is a senior now and he needs the company. I thought about how my sisters had genuinely discussed taking my dog from me as an act of intervention, while telling me to my face that I was doing great. The second thing was about my divorce. In November of 2021, the week of that first family dinner where they told me, "Of course you are doing great, of course we are here for you," Rhiannon had sent a message at 11:42 p.m. that night. Rhiannon, "Honestly, Trent had to leave. She was making him miserable. He told Greg last summer that she's exhausting to live with." Colette, "She's always been exhausting." Rhiannon, I love her, but he stayed way too long." Colette, "She's going to spin this as a mutual decision." Rhiannon, "Of course she is. Mom will buy it. Mom always buys her version." I knew, sitting at that conference room table in November of 2024, that Trent had never told Greg I was exhausting to live with. I knew because Trent and I were still on speaking terms. I texted him every Christmas. He had sent me a card when my dad had a stent put in. I had seen Greg, Rhiannon's husband, 3 or 4 times that summer in 2021, and I knew Greg and Trent were not close. They were not lunch friends. The conversation Rhiannon was citing had not happened. She had made it up, told Colette, and built a story around it. 6 months of holiday dinners had been filtered through that lie. My own mother had probably absorbed pieces of it. The third thing was the worst one. It was about my grandmother. In June of 2024, Colette had written, "BTW, I was over at Grandma's last week. Mom thinks she's slipping. She kept calling me Coco the whole afternoon and forgot Mark's name twice." Rhiannon, "Oh God." Colette, "I think we need to have a real talk soon about her trust and the house. Mom said Grandma is being weird about updating it. She keeps saying she wants to wait." Rhiannon, "Wait for what?" Colette, "I don't know. Wait for Margo to land on her feet, maybe. I think Margo's been in her ear." Rhiannon, "Of course she has." Colette, "We need to get ahead of this, honestly. If Margo gets put on the trust as anything, we are screwed. She has no idea what to do with money." Rhiannon, "We need to talk to Mom about getting Grandma to a different attorney, not Brenneman. He'll do whatever Grandma says. We need someone neutral." Colette, "Yes, 100%, I'll talk to her." I closed the binder. I sat there for a long time. A few things were now very clear. My sisters had been planning, in writing, to maneuver our grandmother into a different attorney. They had been planning to position me as financially unstable so I'd be less credible if the trust ever became a question. They had been planning, slowly, to harvest a frail old woman they thought of as slipping. My grandmother is not slipping. My grandmother had called Colette Coco because Colette has been called Coco since 1985. My grandmother forgot Marcus's name twice, because Marcus's name is Marcus, and Colette only married him in 2019, and Edith had 2 husbands' worth of brothers-in-law to keep track of, and it's not a sin to forget a name. But Colette had started to set the table. Colette had been collecting evidence. Colette and Rhiannon, in their private chat, were already 2.5 years into a slow, patient project to redirect my grandmother's estate. I called Lacey from the parking lot of her building. I said, "Lacey, I need one more thing. I need you to print this whole packet out, bound in 2 copies on cardstock with a navy cover, with page numbers, with a table of contents. The cover should say nothing on it, just navy." She said, "When do you need it by?" I said, "December 1st. She said, "Done." I drove back to Greenfield. I went directly to my grandmother's house on Apple Street. She was on her front porch. She had a cup of coffee in her hand. She was reading a paperback Patricia Highsmith novel with a cracked spine. The petunias had been replaced with mums. It was 47 degrees and she was in her coat. I sat down on the porch swing next to her. I didn't say anything for a minute. Otis was in the car, watching me through the window. Finally, I said, "Grandma, when you said to me, on this porch, 22 years ago, that the loud ones tell you what they want you to see and the quiet ones tell you what's actually there, were you talking about Rhiannon and Colette?" She turned her face toward me. The wind was moving the dry leaves on Apple Street. She looked at me for a long time. Her eyes are the same blue as a public swimming pool in July. They are very awake. She said, "I was talking about all kinds of things, honey, but yes, I was telling you to keep your eyes open. I knew what your sisters were already, even when they were teenagers. I have been a county clerk for 37 years. I have watched 1,000 families fight over a house. The ones you have to watch are not the ones who are loud at the funeral. The ones you have to watch are the ones who are loud at the dinner before." I said, "Grandma, I have to tell you something." She said, "Margo, I have known something was coming since November of 2021. The night of that Thanksgiving when both of them performed for you. Honey, I knew. I have been talking to Lyle Brenneman for 2 years. We are almost done." I started crying. I sat on her porch swing in the cold, and I cried for 10 minutes with my face in my hands, the way you cry when you finally put something down that you didn't know you were carrying. She let me. She sat next to me with her coffee. When I was done, she said, "Tell me what you have." I told her about the chat, about the 1,847 messages, about the binder being printed. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she said, "Bring it to my birthday, December 7th. Set it next to my plate. I will know what it is." I said, "Grandma, are you sure? There are going to be 14 people there." She said, "I am 81 years old. I have been waiting on this since I gave birth to your mother. December 7th. Bring the binder." She took a sip of her coffee. She looked out at her yard. She said very quietly, "And Margo, tell Lyle I said yes. He'll know what that means." I drove home. I called Lyle Brenneman's office that afternoon. His secretary, a woman named Donna who I'd known since I was a kid, picked up. I said, "Donna, this is Margo Linden. My grandmother said to tell Lyle yes." There was a small pause on the line. Then Donna said, "Honey, he is going to be so glad to hear that. He's been waiting. I'll put you on his calendar for tomorrow at 10. Can you come in?" I went the next morning. Lyle Brenneman is 68 years old and wears the same brown loafers he's worn since I was a kid. They had belonged to his father. He has an IBM Selectric on his desk that he still uses for the first draft of every estate document before the paralegal puts it into Word. There's a glass bowl of butterscotch candies on the corner of his desk. I took one. He sat down across from me with a folder that was already prepared. He said, "Margo, your grandmother and I have been working on this since the spring of 2023. I want to walk you through what your role will be and what your role will not be. Are you ready?" I said yes. He showed me the documents. Edith had a revocable living trust she had set up in 1994 when she retired from the county. Her two daughters, my mother and my Aunt Marilyn, had been named as co-trustees with rights of survivorship. In 2018, my mother had asked Edith if Rhiannon and Colette could be added as successor co-trustees to share the burden. Edith, in 2018, had agreed. In 2023, Edith had asked Lyle to begin preparing an amendment. The amendment removed Rhiannon and Colette as successor co-trustees. It named me, Margo Linden, and the firm of Brenneman and Voss as successor co-trustees. It established a structured distribution to my mother and Aunt Marilyn. It established a fixed sum of $50,000 each to Rhiannon and Colette, designated specifically for their children's college funds, to be released only on the children's 18th birthdays. The remaining estate, including the house on Apple Street and a brokerage account my grandfather had opened in 1972 that had grown for 52 years untouched, was to go into a trust managed by Brenneman and Voss for distribution at my discretion as trustee, with primary remainder beneficiary status to me. I said, "Lyle, that's a lot." He said, "Your grandmother has been very specific. She told me, and I quote, 'The quiet one is the one who will spend it the way I would have spent it. The other two would have it gone in 3 years, and then there would be nothing left for the great-grandchildren. Margo will keep it growing. Margo will pay the property taxes. Margo will know which grandchild needs what." He looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. He said, "Margo, the amendment has been drafted. Your grandmother has reviewed every line. All she has been waiting for is to know that you understand what you are accepting. That is what yesterday was on her porch. She is going to sign on Monday, December 9th, in this office, with Donna and myself as witnesses. She wanted me to tell you that the timing is not an accident. She wanted to do it after her birthday. She wanted to look around the table on Saturday and know." I sat there in his office. I ate my butterscotch. I said, "Okay, tell her okay." He said, "I will." I drove home. I picked up the bound binder from the FedEx on State Road 9 the following Tuesday. The young man at the counter handed it to me in a clear plastic bag. He said, "That's a heavy one, ma'am." It was 312 pages on cardstock with a navy spiral binding. The cover was blank. I had asked for that. I took it home. I sat at my kitchen table. I opened it and went through all 1,847 entries one more time. I flagged the 40 worst ones with small blue Post-it tabs, the kind teachers use to mark up textbooks. I wrote a single page on my laptop, printed it on cream paper, and slipped it into the inside front cover. The page said, "Grandma, these are the messages my sisters have been sending each other about me since October of 2020. There are 1,847 of them. The blue tabs mark the ones I want you to read first. I am not asking you to do anything with this. I just wanted you to have it. Margo, Greenfield, December 2024. I closed the binder. I put it on the kitchen table next to the white Pyrex bowl. I went to bed. December 7th came up fast. The days got shorter. The middle school had its winter break starting the week before, and I baked 4 loaves of pumpkin bread for the lunch, 3 for the table, and 1 wrapped in tin foil for Grandma to take home. I got the binder out of the cardboard box in my closet and set it on the passenger seat of my Honda CR-V on Saturday morning at 11:15. Otis was at the doggy daycare for the day. I dropped him off at 9. I drove out to the mill house at 11:20. The mill house is a converted feed mill on the east side of Greenfield. It has exposed brick walls and wide plank floors and wagon wheel chandeliers, and a small brass plaque by the door that says, "Established 1971. For my grandmother's 82nd, my Aunt Marilyn had reserved the long farmhouse table in the back corner, the one with the windows looking out onto the railroad tracks. The hostess that day was a woman named Brittany, who I knew because her younger brother had been one of my counseling students 3 years ago. I had called the restaurant on Wednesday and asked Brittany a small favor. She met me at the door. I gave her the binder in its clear plastic bag. I said, Brittany, set this next to my grandmother's place setting, right side on top of the bread plate. Don't say anything, just set it down. She's expecting it. Brittany said, yes, ma'am. She is from the South originally, and yes, ma'am is just how she talks. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 more minutes. I watched the family arrive. My parents in the Buick, Aunt Marilyn and her husband Jim in their Subaru, Rhiannon and Greg and the boys in the Tahoe, Colette and Marcus and Brynel in the Lexus. I watched them walk in. I watched my grandmother arrive last in Aunt Marilyn's Subaru. She was wearing the dark blue dress with the white piping that she wore every December and the small pearl earrings she'd had since 1962. I went in at 11:58. The whole table was already seated. Grandma at the head, the binder on the bread plate in its clear plastic bag, looking exactly like a wrapped gift. She looked up when I walked in. She nodded at me just once, very small. Rhiannon was at the table, talking. She was wearing a cream cashmere sweater. She was telling some story about the boys' soccer team. Colette was nodding and smiling. Brynel was on her iPad. My mom and Aunt Marilyn were splitting a glass of white wine. Greg and Marcus were comparing something on their phones. I sat in the empty seat across from Aunt Marilyn. I said hi to everyone. I kissed my grandmother on the cheek. I said, "Happy birthday, Grandma." She squeezed my hand under the table. Hard. Rhiannon kept talking. Brittany came and took drink orders. Marcus made a joke about how Brynel was on her 6th episode of Blue Eye. The table laughed. Then my grandmother quietly removed the binder from the plastic bag, set the bag in her lap, and placed the navy binder on the table in front of her plate. Aunt Marilyn noticed first. She said, "Mama, what's that?" My grandmother said, "Margo brought me a gift, a little early reading." Rhiannon glanced over. Her eyes went to the binder. She didn't recognize it. There was no logo, no marking, no title. It was just a navy binder. She said, "Aw, Marg, what is it?" I didn't say anything. I let Grandma do it. Grandma opened the binder. The cream cover page was on top. She read it silently to herself. The whole table watched her. She read it again. Then she set the cover page to the side, opened the binder to page 1, and started to read. She read for about 30 seconds. She turned a page. She read for 30 seconds more. She turned another page. The table started to feel quieter. Rhiannon was looking at her now. Colette was too. Their faces had stopped doing the warm party thing. Their faces were starting to do a different thing. Grandma turned another page. She kept reading. Then she did something I will never forget. She looked up at Rhiannon, then at Colette, very slowly. She said in her totally normal county clerk voice, "Coco, Rhiannon, did you write this?" Rhiannon said, "Write what, Grandma?" Grandma turned the binder around. She slid it across the table toward Rhiannon very slowly. Open to page 47, where one of the blue tabs was. Rhiannon looked down. She made a sound, a small one, like a word getting stuck in her throat. Aunt Marilyn leaned over. Aunt Marilyn is 68 years old. She is a retired ER nurse. She has read a lot of charts in her life. She read for about 10 seconds. Then she said, in a very flat voice, "Rhiannon Linden, are you serious?" That was the moment. My grandmother hadn't said a thing. Aunt Marilyn had reacted first. The non-aligned witness at the table, Mom's older sister, the woman who had no skin in the trust because she'd married money in 1985 and lived in Carmel and didn't need a dime, had read 4 lines and looked up at her own niece like she was looking at a stranger. Rhiannon started to say, "It's not, I didn't, that's out of context." Colette beside her said, "What is it? Show me." Aunt Marilyn turned the binder around, kept reading, and then turned it again toward Colette. Colette read for about 4 seconds before she put her hand over her mouth. She said, "Oh my God." My mother said, "What is it? What's in it? Somebody tell me." Aunt Marilyn said, "Sandra, your daughters have been writing about Margo behind her back for 4 years, in a chat. They named the chat Margo Updates. The waitress came to ask if we were ready to order appetizers. Brittany, behind the bar, had the sense to send the waitress away. My father said, "Wait, what?" Rhiannon stood up from the table. She said, this is not appropriate. "Margo, how could you do this on Grandma's birthday?" I looked at her. I didn't raise my voice. I said, "Rhiannon, I didn't do anything. You did. I just brought paper." Colette said, "Margo, we were venting. Sisters vent. You're taking it completely out of context." I said, "There are 1,847 messages. Coco. There is no context that makes 1,847 messages venting." Greg, Rhiannon's husband, was now looking over Rhiannon's shoulder at the binder. He had not said a word yet. His face had gone the color of skim milk. He pointed at one of the entries on the page that was open. He said, in a voice that was too quiet, "Rye, you wrote this about my mother." Rhiannon said, Greg said, "About my mother, with the cancer, 3 weeks before she died." The table went absolutely still. I didn't know about that one. I hadn't read the whole binder a third time. There had to be one in there I hadn't flagged that he had just seen. Greg picked up the binder. He turned a few more pages. He stood there in his Saturday lunch sweater reading with his glasses on. After a minute he said, "I need a minute." He walked out the front door of the restaurant. Rhiannon went after him, her cream sweater, the boys still at the table eating bread. Colette was crying. Marcus was rubbing the bridge of his nose. My mother was looking at the binder with her hand over her mouth. My grandmother at the head of the table took a sip of her water. She said, "Brittany, could we do the appetizers in 15 minutes, please?" Brittany said, "Yes, ma'am." The lunch did not really continue. We ate appetizers. We made small talk around the boys, who didn't understand what was happening but knew the air at the table had changed. My grandmother ate a salmon fillet with green beans and finished her birthday slice of carrot cake and tipped Brittany $40 from her own purse. She insisted on paying for the whole table. Aunt Marilyn drove her home. The binder went home with my grandmother in the front seat of Aunt Marilyn's Subaru. I drove back to my house. I picked Otis up from the doggy day care on the way. I got home, changed into sweatpants, sat on my couch and stared at the wall. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. I felt the kind of tired you feel when you've been carrying a heavy box up a staircase for 4 years and you finally set it down at the top and your arms keep shaking for a while. I want to ask you something else. Have you ever set a boundary and watched someone completely unravel because you stopped being convenient for them? Have you ever realized that the entire performance of your relationship had been them, all along, and you had just been politely sitting there as the audience? Tell me in the comments. I need to hear it. The fallout started Sunday morning, December 8th, before I'd even had coffee. Greg called me first, Rhiannon's husband. He hadn't called me ever in 12 years. He said, "Margo, I'm going to ask you a question and I need you to be honest with me. Is what's in that binder a complete record, or is there more?" I said, "Greg, it's complete. There were no edits. We pulled it directly from the carrier." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "There's a passage about my mother, from the week before she passed, about how she was a, quote, drawn-out problem, and how Rhiannon was looking forward to it being over so she could get some sleep." I had not flagged that one. I had read it once and put a different tab on a different page because I had 100 to choose from. Reading it had made my stomach drop. But it had been Greg's mother, not mine. So I'd left it for him to find or not find. He said, "Margo, I've been with Rhiannon for 14 years. I have always known she had a sharper edge with you. I never knew it was that. I never knew it was that other thing, too." He paused. He said, "I'm going to need to think for a while. Don't tell anyone I called." I said okay. Greg moved into the spare bedroom that night. By the second week of January, he had retained a divorce attorney out of Indianapolis. The divorce was filed at the end of February. Rhiannon contested nothing. Greg had not just the binder. He had 3 other text threads where Rhiannon had spoken about his mother in similar terms over the years, which the divorce attorney's e-discovery process pulled in routine fashion. The boys are with him primarily at his request. Rhiannon has Wednesday nights and every other weekend. Colette did not call me. She called my mother. She told my mother that I had ambushed her at a family event, that the binder was decontextualized, that she was the real victim, that I had always been jealous of her and Rhiannon. My mother, who had spent 2 decades absorbing that exact narrative, listened to it on Sunday morning and called my grandmother on Sunday afternoon to ask if there was anything she could do to help. My grandmother said, "Sandra, stop talking. Sit down. I'm going to read you what your daughters wrote about your mother." That was a passage I hadn't flagged either, about my grandmother, from August of 2024. Colette had written, "She is dragging this out forever. I love her, but she could just go in her sleep at this point and we'd all sleep better." Rhiannon had written, "Yeah, Mom is going to be a wreck and we're going to spend a year cleaning that up." My mother got off the phone. She drove over to my grandmother's house. They sat on the porch swing in the cold for 2 hours. My mother came out of that conversation a different woman. I don't know everything they said. My grandmother won't tell me. My mother has not really talked to Colette since. The dental office thing happened in late January. The practice where Colette worked is owned by a woman named Diane Fenimore, who has been a client of Brenneman and Voss since 1991, who plays bridge with my grandmother every other Thursday at the Knights of Columbus Hall, and who has known Colette since Colette was 12. After the lunch, my grandmother had asked Lyle to make Diane a copy of the relevant 60 pages, the ones where Colette had described patients of Diane's practice in unflattering ways, including by full name, including their dental insurance status, and including a particularly cruel passage about an elderly patient who had needed dentures and had been gross to look at during impressions. Diane is not a sentimental woman. She let Colette go on a Tuesday morning, citing breach of HIPAA-adjacent privacy practices, with 2 weeks of severance and no reference. Colette has not yet found another front office position. Marcus's dental practice in Carmel has not offered her one. I don't know why. I don't ask. Lyle Brenneman signed my grandmother's trust amendment on Monday, December 9th, 2 days after the birthday lunch, with Donna witnessing. He notarized it himself. The original is in his fireproof box. A certified copy is in a safe deposit box at First Financial Bank in Greenfield. Another one is in a manila folder in my grandmother's hat box in her cedar closet, next to her father's pocket watch and her own mother's wedding ring. My grandmother gave me a key to the safe deposit box at Christmas in a small envelope with my name on it in her county clerk handwriting. She said, "Honey, keep this in your shoebox with the paper things. You'll know when." I have not had to use it yet. My grandmother is still alive. She is still on the porch swing every afternoon when the weather is good. She made it to 82 and then to 83 this past November. We had her birthday at the Mill House again. Brittany, the hostess, gave her a piece of cake on the house and called her Mrs. Linden. Rhiannon was not there. Colette was not there. They have been removed from the family group text thread that my mother started in January, which is just now my parents, Aunt Marilyn, my grandmother, and me. Greg comes to the holidays now with the boys. He brings a fruit salad. He calls me to ask what to bring before every dinner, the way Trent used to. The boys play with Otis in my parents' backyard. Rhiannon has called me twice since December 7th, 2024. The first time was 3 days after the lunch. She left a voicemail that started with "Marg, hi, I want to clear the air on a couple of things," and went on for 9 minutes. I listened to all 9. I deleted it. I did not call back. The second time was last August. She left a voicemail that was 22 seconds long. She said, "Margo, hey, it's me. I just wanted to say, I get it. I get why you did it. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I get it. Take care of Otis." I listened to that one twice. I cried for about 10 minutes. I did not call her back. I'm not ready. I don't know if I will ever be ready. My therapist tells me I do not have to decide that today, so I haven't. Colette has not called me. She has not written me. She passes me at the IGA in town and looks straight through me. Marcus has unfollowed me on Instagram. Brynel, who is my niece, is 6. I send her a birthday card every February with $20 in it because she is 6 and she did not write any of those messages. Last Thursday, I had dinner with my grandmother on her porch. It was 51 degrees and getting dark by 5:30. I'd brought her a pot pie from the grocery store and a small jar of pumpkin butter from the Hancock County Farmers Market. She had made coffee. We sat on the porch swing with blankets on our laps. The mums were brown around the edges. She said, "Margo, are you all right?" I said, "I think I am, Grandma. I'm tired, but I'm all right." She said, "Tired is the right word, honey. That's how it's supposed to feel. Anybody who tells you justice feels good has not actually had any." I said, "Grandma, why did you wait until your 82nd? Why not your 80th? Or your 81st? Why not just call me in 2022 and say, 'Hey, the family is rotting under your feet. Here is what we do.'" She thought about that for a minute. She rocked the swing with her foot. She said, "Honey, 2 reasons. First, you weren't ready in 2022. You were still trying to be liked by them. You would have softened the blow on yourself. You would have called Rhiannon and tried to understand her. You needed to live through enough of it to know in your bones." She said, "Second, they weren't ready either. They had to do enough on their own that there was no room left to argue. If I had moved the trust in 2022, your sisters would have screamed in court for 10 years and called me a senile old woman. By 2024, they had written the case against themselves. There was nothing to argue. Anybody can read." She said, "I have been waiting to give you a real life for a very long time, Margo. Since the first time I held you. You were the quiet baby. The other 2 screamed. You watched. I knew." I sat there on the porch swing and did not say anything. The streetlights came on at the corner of Apple and 6th. A pickup truck rolled by with the windows down playing country music. She reached over and took my hand. Her hand is small and dry and the wedding ring is still on it. She said, "Honey, listen to me. Peace doesn't come from getting even. It comes from standing on something solid that somebody built for you and knowing for the rest of your life that you are not alone, even when everyone in the room is lying about who you are. The paper does not love you, but the person who wrote the paper did." I thought about that for a long time on the drive home. I'm still thinking about it. I want to tell you what I have learned, sitting on this side of it, almost a year and a half later. I have learned that real love does not test you to prove you deserve it. The people who love you are quietly building a floor under your feet that you cannot see, while the people who do not love you are quietly building a case against you that they think you cannot read. I have learned that you do not have to scream to be heard. You can walk into a room with a navy binder and set it down next to a plate, and the room will do the screaming for you. I have learned that the people who plan ahead for you are not always the people standing in front of you. Sometimes they are an 81-year-old woman on a porch swing in Greenfield, Indiana, who told you something on a hot afternoon in 2003 that you didn't understand for 2 decades, and who has been waiting, patiently, for you to be ready to understand it. If you have been the quiet one in your family, the one they roll their eyes at, the one they leave out of the photo, the one they think is too soft to notice what is happening to her, please hear me. You are not imagining it. You are not being too sensitive. The people writing about you are also writing the evidence. Your job is not to react. Your job is to live a life so steady, so kind, so unshakable, that when the time comes, all you have to do is bring the paper. If you could protect one thing in your life, a place, a person, a promise, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. I want to know what you would set the binder down for. If this story stayed with you, there's a link in the description to another one you'll want to hear. Insert referenced video title. It's about a woman whose mother spent 2 years quietly hiding her real wedding ring in a mason jar in the garden because she could see what was coming for her daughter. I'll see you there. Take care of yourself this week. Eat something warm. Call the person who quietly loved you when nobody else did. And if you are the quiet one in your family, the one who watches, the one who notices, the one they all underestimate, please remember what my grandmother told me on that porch in 2003. People underestimate the quiet ones their whole life. That is a useful thing to know. Good night from Greenfield. I'm Margo Linden. Thank you for staying with me to the end.